Welcome to another video, everyone. Today I am going to show you some compositional ideas and thoughts I have when I capture my photography, and hopefully you can take something out of that video and apply it to your photography in the future and get better photos. We're going to look at 15 different shots I captured during a week-long trip. Well, it's actually 3 days of photography in the city of Essaouira in Morocco last week. These were all captured with my Fujifilm GFX 100 Mark II and 32 to 64 f4 lens. And I captured everything in a panoramic ultra-wide aspect ratio. This camera comes with this feature, and it basically imitates the aspect ratio that when you put a 35mm film into a 120mm medium format camera, you actually get a double exposure. So you'll actually expose 2 frames in one single photo, and you get an ultra-wide double width 35mm frame, which gives you a beautiful panoramic shot. I set my camera to that setting just to have a creative limitation and figure out how I would capture my photos. Just sort of setting limitations and trying to find ways to capture photos. We're going to look through these photos, and I'll just try and cover why I picked these as my favorites, and mostly stay focused on compositional rules or aspects of photography. Let's dive in. The first shot is a sunset shot in the harbor, and everyone was sort of lined up on this old city wall to capture, to look at the sunset that was, imminent, just happening right there. And it allowed me to get pretty close to these people. This is a medium format camera. This is probably shot at around 32mm, which is about 25mm in full frame equivalency. And that actually means that you have quite a bit of distortion. So all these parallel shadows are no longer parallel. They are actually forming these beautiful leading lines. And I thought that was really interesting as I looked through the viewfinder. It's not necessarily something you notice with your eye, as you don't really see those converging lines with your eye, but once you look through a camera you get distortion or compression, and you notice these things. So these created beautiful leading lines, and what I really loved is that everyone just was facing the sunset. Every element here is singled out. There's no overlap, maybe a little bit here, but it's 90% super clean composition or super clean contrasting lines, and it just creates for a pleasing thing to look at. There's no mess, it's decluttered. I underexposed the shot to avoid overexposing the sun, and I applied some sort of like gritty, grainy, almost film-like look to these images, as you can you'll see in the next few photos as well. So yeah, this worked out really well. Was very happy with the way the photo came out. So the next shot, this shot here is actually not in the harbor area, it's more in the town, and it's in the middle of the day. As you can tell, it's super contrasty. But man, it's just a moment that happened, and I love the silhouette of this kid running through the road and giving us movement. Now, I did actually capture this shot with a slight tilt, but I ended up enhancing this tilt. So if you look at all my vertical lines, they're all a bit crooked. And that is because I wanted to enhance the sense of motion, movement in this image. So we went for a slight Dutch angle, as you call it in cinematography terms. What really works for me here is you have so many different zones. You have a dark area here, bright area here, dark, bright, dark, bright, dark. And you're creating so many different layers in this shot. We have, a good color contrast. We got the blue area here and the yellow area here. Also plenty of lines, none of them are straight. Everything contributing to creating dynamic movement in the shot. In general, I like contrasty shots. I don't really go out and lift the shadows, raise, or bring down the highlights to show all the detail. I like the feeling of mystery in a photo. So the only thing that I brightened up was this stair here, and to perfectionize this shot, it would have been so cool to have like someone's foot going up here or coming down. I think up would have been nicer. I just raised the shadows slightly here, created a slight gradient from the left to show off the tile work, the pattern in here. But obviously you have to be very subtle with these things, because you cannot raise the shadows like crazy in one area and then have almost no detail in others. It just doesn't make sense when you look at the photo. By raising the shadows here, I created more leading lines or more diagonal lines in this shot, getting the eye to the main area of the shot, the subject here. Okay, what worked out really well was that this guy, in the moment I captured this photo, was exactly in front of this pillar, and his dark silhouetted face, you can almost recognize it, works really well. So you have this dark area contrasted with this bright area, like him and this pillar, so it stands out well. If this was somewhere here, we would have had like a black blob with a black background, which doesn't work so well. So that was worked out really well. And after brightening up the shadows a little bit on his face, I actually realized that was a guy I went and there's a restaurant owner just behind my back. There was a restaurant and he was on the way to his restaurant and I had dinner there. Recognized him after the fact. Into the next shot. Okay, this is what a scene, you know, there's so much going on. The big camera that I was shooting with didn't really allow me to be as invisible as I had wished for, and it meant that I had to sort of sit a bit further back. Now, using the ultra-wide panoramic aspect ratio I'm using here meant that I would have loads of things going on. This is in the harbor, there's people everywhere, things are happening. Also, mostly middle of the day scene, as you can tell with the contrast, and I just loved all the shapes and colors and textures happening here. And instead of trying to find the most clean possible composition, I actually went and shot much wider than I would normally and much more messy than I would normally shoot a street scene. In the moment, I wasn't actually sure if I liked what I was capturing, but here, now seeing it, I actually quite think it worked out really well. And pushing the contrast even further in post allowed me to really focus on shapes, you know. You've got all these people, in a way, still quite clean, you know, compared to the background, or there's always some sort of clean way of recognizing what's happening. And there are all these like zones. We've got this umbrella thing here. We have a bright area here. There's just so much texture and shape going on. And I feel like this shot is something that if you were to look at it, you know, in a big print, it'd be quite interesting and fun to look at. I think there's so much to discover here, and that's why I picked it and why I like it. There is chaos, but there seems to be an order in this composition, which happened to, you know, work out well in my favor. Here we have another scene from the harbor. Again, not as clean as I would normally try to shoot, but what I found is that this ultra-wide panoramic aspect ratio really forces you to document life as it's happening on so many levels. It's very difficult to single out a single action here, unless you get really, really close or you zoom in a long way. But I like to shoot like a deep focus. I like to have things recognizable in the foreground and the background. So I stay fairly wide, shoot at a fairly tight aperture, maybe f16 or f14, f11, in that range, just to have a whole story going on from the foreground to the background, just to have things to discover for the viewer. And what I noticed with the wide aspect ratio was that you really have to embrace the life happening and embrace that you will not have a very clean composition. It's possible, but in this case I had to stay a bit further back and just document it as it was unfolding in front of me. What I like here is this guy pushing this, well, there's several of them, but this guy really stands out, pushing this cart in this direction, which with the, you know, diagonal lines leading our eyes towards the subject, which is this cart here. It works out really well. What I also really liked was the chaos of all these boats and all these lines in the background. I've got several photos just of the chaoticness of this harbor. Absolutely beautiful to look at. This is a catch of the day being pushed into this area here where it's being prepared and sold for the city, which is in the background. And yeah, it tells a beautiful story. And that's why I liked it. Here we have a slightly more simplified composition. If we look at this, this is the famous city of Essaouira, and these are the city walls here that protect the harbor where I'm actually walking over the city wall here. They're protecting the harbor to my right, and it was 6 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, just before sunrise, rising in the east. And I just love these colors and these gradients in the sky. Going from dark here to bright here worked out so beautifully. And just hinting at the rocks and all these silhouettes in the water really helped, filling the frame with things that are happening. Of course, you've got a ton of seagulls. This is very early in the morning. I didn't really want to push my ISO too far, so there's actually a bit of motion blur, but I embraced it. I liked it. Created movement in the shot, and I thought it was beautiful. It was tricky maybe to balance this shot, but I feel like the tower here and the rock here kind of balance each other out a bit, so that worked out quite well. All right, this is one of the few compositions that worked out really well. This is also before sunrise, or minutes before sunrise. You can see the sky is brightening up. Beautiful diagonal lines, leading lines from every frame from every corner of the frame. It just leads you in towards the center of the frame. And then we have this woman beautifully silhouetted. The reason this shot works so well with you've got this nice gradient in the road, is that I'm standing near a city gate and it's right behind me. And that means that it was basically a negative fill and creating a lot of shadow in these foreground areas, which, enhances that gradient. And then her silhouette, and I love her little red head thing, and it just creates it. She just stands out so beautifully. I like that there's another person coming in the background as well. Just creating a little more visual interest, and there are different things going on. I know it's not a clean city. This is a very, very busy street during the day, and life was about to awaken, and you can still see like traces of trash and things just everywhere in the composition. And I could have cleaned these things up, but in a way, this is life. This is what it looks like in these places, and pretending that it's anything else feels like a lie. So I really wanted to document life as it is for real and create beautiful compositions of a life that's happening. Moments later, maybe half an hour later, back in the harbor, I was walking around a lot trying to find my compositions and my stories. I love these blue doors everywhere in the back here. These are little stalls from the fishermen where they prepare the fish and where they wait for the tide or for their time to go fishing. And you can see part of the city wall here as well. And basically our subject is here, these guys about to go out with their boat. I saw them coming and found my gap and really quickly snapped this photo of these guys, coming out from behind this boat here. But it was all about finding a little gap where the sky is reflecting in the water, giving us a bit of a cleaner composition area and, separating their boat from the background. I think I even raised my camera to make sure that their heads were not, mushed against the boat behind them, just to be sure that I have a clean silhouette of these guys. And again, so many layers, so much going on. If you look at all the lines intersecting and creating different directions all over the composition, there's just so much movement, and it allows the eye, or the viewer's eye, to wander around this whole composition and just going left and right, and you're just basically exploring every little aspect of this. Again, one of these shots that can be so beautifully printed, I would say, and really large. And this is a 100 megapixel shot that would probably look really great in a big print. Here is another photo, one of my favorites actually, again, a couple hours later, and it was, you know, a bit of haze in the sky, but you get these beautiful like highlights bouncing everywhere in the composition, and it creates, again, texture, patterns, and just things to look at and explore with your eyes. It's the chaos for me, you know, the finding, maybe not order, but finding the chaos and finding a way to separate all these different elements in these shots to create visual interest. I really loved all these things in the foreground here with the fishermen nets that they had been sorting and fixing in the day before, lying around here, and it just creates a beautiful 1, 2, 3 kind of composition. This here is all foreground. Here we have the middle, and then the bright sky and the silhouette of everything in the back is the background, and it just creates a nice balance, even though if you look at this, it's just so busy. But if you backlight stuff, things tend to look great. Again, a full chaos. I love this light bouncing around from the water. You get a double brightness because it's hitting the water and coming back to the camera, as well as the light coming straight from the sun into the sensor. And yeah, again, this glow, you know, and here we have the seagulls. There's probably more in this shot. Oh, here we go. Creating, you know, life and a little bit of story. And again, if you look at the amount of lines and chaos to these foreground lines here, all cutting the composition in all kinds of elements. And I think this is what makes it visually interesting. Actually, there's, you know, there is chaos, but there is sort of a beautiful balance between light and dark, and that creates texture and interest. I'm a big fan of not overexposing the sky and more going for a crushed black and making sure that every piece of highlight is still available. Of course, that's not always 100% possible like down here, but you get the gist. But there are so many layers happening here. Moving on to the next one. Lots of things going on, but I tried to create a horizontal organization in this. I was actually capturing this texture and chaos and smell in this area already, but I saw him coming and found a place for him in my composition, gave him a little bit of a clean spot, and he is the key visual thing, even though he's so far on the edge. But what really got me interested was all the texture, you know, all the dirt and grime and the layers of paint and the trash and the amount of seagull poop in these shots is what really made it. And again, this is a kind of shot that needs to be printed to be really appreciated. And again, here this disgusting puddle here was actually also, I used it to create more chaos than we would already have. So you have all these zones, all these different areas in these shots that create interest, that create contrast, that create texture. And there's a pattern emerging here. Texture is the word. Different zones of light and dark and beautiful color contrast create, you know, different areas of interest for the viewer. Beautiful shot in a way. It's not pretty, but it is a composition that works. This is a pure texture shot. Again, I was attracted to the texture of what's going on here, the fishing net, all these plastics and covers and boxes and colors. Everything sort of is different. Nothing looks the same, nothing is regular, nothing is the same size. Everything has, you know, a texture that's different from what's next to it, and it just creates, yeah, a beautiful texture. You can almost feel as you're looking at it. And yes, I really enjoyed the shadows, and then towards lightness where the sky is almost overexposed, but everything is still there, and it creates sort of it weighs down the image, the composition a little bit. You have these dark areas here in the foreground. They're all creating a bit of weight that balances itself quite well with the sky. This is a few hours later. The sun has risen. I think I might have actually overexposed the sky here, or some of the walls, and it's still quite early. As you can tell, someone's sleeping. In an empty street, it's always easy to create a fairly clean composition. You get a lot of lines that help you create something that looks visually interesting, that guides the eye to you know, the point that's the messiest maybe here, but at the same time it's clean because it's so balanced with these giant like empty areas. This giant blue door here, again same here, a blue door, and a, you know, nice clean space. And I like that this balances out quite well with here, where he is fairly isolated, maybe not 100% isolated from the background, but it gives us a nice balance between this and this. This is the market area, and I spotted all these cats sitting here and thought these will look great backlit. The sun is shining in, you can see, and it creates beautiful light and darkness. Texture on the ground was interesting, but yeah, this really helps to emphasize the contrast on the cats. But these lines actually all converge in this direction, where there's a subject, where there is actually something else happening. I did notice there's a person walking here. If I was really keen, I would probably clean this up, but I tried to leave things as they are. I deliberately left this corner in here to frame him, so if this was not here and the composition would end there, then he would not be as beautifully framed in this area here. And we've got nice sunlight backlighting and glowing, not quite onto him, but into this area here. So it's still quite early in the morning. Also here, beautiful arches creating texture, interest, and again creating leading lines into the depth of where one of our subjects is, and these guys are pointing towards this subject. So that worked out beautifully in this composition. Okay, that was it for this little compositional video. Basically, I was looking for texture, contrast, lines, but then using this wide aspect ratio that my camera has to document life. You know, life happens on a horizontal plane mostly. Yes, we're in a city, there's things happening on different layers, but people tend to live on ground level, and things are happening on ground level. And it was a beautiful challenge to try and bring together compositions that work, that are, yes, messy, but in the same time also create or tell a beautiful story, and that tell life as it is, unpolished, chaotic, and full of texture, color, and vibrancy. So yeah, don't always look for the cleanest composition. Don't always look for the simple one-centered thing. I feel like this can be a trend because of social media and, you know, people looking at photos on a really small screen. Yes, these photos would not work so well and when they're looked at really small, but I think photography is meant to be looked at big. It's documenting life in a big, beautiful way, and actually try and capture a series of photos that mean something, that tell a story. So yeah, enough waffling for today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please let me know down in the comments. This was quite easy and fun to make, so it could be cool to make a little series of this, and in the future also do this with landscape work, with maybe different kinds of photography, black and white, long exposure. Yeah, maybe I can combine this with some video work in the field as I capture these photos. But for now, we're keeping it simple, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.